Thanks for taking a few minutes to watch this video and help answer some of my questions about UVing. I really appreciate it. The question I have is, when unwrapping a model, is it better to have more shells that use as much of the UV 0 to 1 space as possible, but creates more seams on your model, or have the UV layout, or have a UV layout that allows for better textures, but doesn't fully utilize the UV space? So as an example, I have two models here. One is of a dress mannequin, one is of a bike. If we look at this dress mannequin's UVs, you can see that it takes up a good portion of the 0 to 1 space. The goal is that when I apply a fabric over this, that it seamlessly runs from the base to the top. I don't know if you can see it in the reference, but this is kind of what the end result would be. There are seams that run along the sides, but the fabric is continuous from here to here. So if I wanted to take up more UV space with these shells, I could split it down the center here and then repack and then take up more 0 to 1 space on this UV chart. But that would introduce seams that aren't in the reference and that I don't necessarily want on the model. Although in this case, honestly, I don't think it would be that noticeable. But say on a model like this bike here, if we look at the UVs for this bike, you'll notice right off the bat that these do not take up all of the 0 to 1 space. There's a lot of empty texture space up here that could be used. That's not. But the goal for this bike is that if it's close up, for example, these tires, if we look at the reference, these tires have tread on them. And these treads I would like to see consistently projected across the surface of the geometry. I want them to be continuous. I don't want them to be cut up. So obviously if we look at this, so if we look here in the UV map, let me highlight this. This is that represents the bike tire right here, and there's two UV shells overlapping, so they both take up the same amount of UV space. I could potentially cut this up into 2 or maybe even 4 additional pieces. I could do that with these UV shells below it as well, and then repack, and I would take up more of the 0 to 1 space. But when I go in and add that tread pattern, it's going to have seams, it's likely to be inconsistent at points on the tire, and I don't want to sacrifice that texture quality to increase my usage of UV space. And so that's my question. Now I have two possible solutions that I can think of. One is a texture atlas. Yes, there's extra space up here, but as I'm adding this to a texture atlas, likely there will be UVs from another model that can fit into this empty space and utilize it, so that's good. And but that doesn't really work necessarily for one-offs when you have a model that just has its own texture. In many cases, this could be a character map of some kind. So I'm not quite sure how to get around that. I could readjust these shells. I could shrink some, enlarge others, and then take up all the UV space like that, but then my texel density will be inconsistent across the surface of the model. I don't want that either. The other solution that I can think of, which I guess is the third solution, is I could just UV this so that it utilizes the space to the best ability. Just put down the shells in a way that take up as much of the 0 to 1 space as possible. Then I could duplicate it, and I could re-UV it in a way that is more efficient for creating good textures, and then when I'm done, I could take the results of that model and bake that information down onto the model that has the UVs that take up all the 0 to 1 space. Now, I've tried stuff like that in the past, and it works, but the extra work you have to put into doing a second model with proper UVs that you then bake onto your your other model with the efficient UVs is something I try to avoid if possible, just because of the amount of time it adds to the project. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Those are my solutions. That's my question. When I unwrap, should I use more UV shells and get with more seams, or should I use a UV texture? Should I use a layout like this that's going to give me better results in my texture? What do you do? How do you handle UV mapping? What are some possible solutions that I'm just not aware of? Please let me know, and thank you. I really appreciate it.